as well as direct examination of Jean Stewart and the cross-examination of Justice Delaney.
I am Sachi Dada. I will be delivering the direct examination of Teddy Exley and the cross-examination of Jamie Brooks. Additionally, I will also be giving the opening statements.
My name is Alec Evans. I will be giving the direct of Lieutenant Tony Jessup and the cross of Max Truly.
My name is Michael Hartshorn, and I am John Stewart.
My name is MaryKate Veal, and I am Teddy Exley.
My name is Ahmadu Simpson, and I am Tony Jessup.
My name is Carolyn Little, and I'll be Tony later.
Thank you. You may be seated. And now we'll have the defense stand up and introduce yourself.
My name is Corinne Brown, and I'm representing the defense. I will be cross-examining James Stewart and examining, or direct examining Justice Delaney, and I will also be delivering the closing argument.
My name is Taylor Dalton. I will be direct examining Max Truly and cross-examining Ted Exley.
My name is Mary Omalara. I will be giving the opening statement for the defense. I will be cross-examining Lieutenant Tony Jessup and direct examining Jamie Brooks.
My name is Taylor Garner, and I'll be playing Max Truly.
My name is Sigel Bashir, and I'll be playing Jessup and Delaney.
My name is Taya Bell, and I'll be playing along with Jamie Brooks.
Thank you. Oh,
My name is Zaire Sutton, and I'll be timekeeper for the defendant.
thank you. You may all be seated. Is each team ready? Now that we have our final evaluator, if you could stand up and introduce yourself to the participants. Okay, give me one moment, but otherwise, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
How about the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, if I could have all the witnesses to please stand. Raise your right hand. Do you promise that the testimony that you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? If you agree, please answer, I do.
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. At this time, before proceeding, does the plaintiff have any pretrial matters you wish to take up?
Yes, Your Honor. We would like to ask for permission to move freely about the courtroom.
Permission granted.
And to clarify, should we ask before approaching a witness?
Since you have asked for permission to freely move about the courtroom, you do not have to ask to approach a witness.
Okay. And we would also like to ask that admitted evidence stay at the witness stand.
Permission granted.
And we'd also like to ask at this time that all benchroom conversations be held in an open courtroom for educational purposes.
Granted.
And we would also like to note at this time that under stipulation 11, Tony Jessup can be treated as a hostile witness, so we will be asking leading questions on direct.
The court will address that matter. We'll readdress it upon direct examination.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
No problem. And does the defense have any pretrial matters?
No, Your Honor.
All right, at this time, we will commence the case. The court now calls to order the case of Tony Jessup versus, remind me of the name of your defense.
Carly Corners, the mall.
Versus Carly Corners. Plaintiff, are you ready to proceed with opening statements?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I, Sachi Dada, along with my co-counsel Alec Evans and Cathy Kane, will be representing the plaintiff, John Stewart. This case is about red flags. Red flags as warning signs. On the rainy day of April 17th, Mr. Stewart just wanted to go for his usual morning walk around Carly Corners Mall. He picked up a slushie and met up with a fellow mall walker, Max Truly, and was ready for this walk. But this did not happen. Instead of finishing his walk and leaving the mall in his car, Mr. Stewart left the mall in an ambulance. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Mr. Stewart was phased in the back by Carly Corners Mall employee Tony Jessup. This is why we are here today. the mall is being sued by John Stewart for the negligent hiring and retention of Tony Jessup. And as plaintiff, we have the burden of proof, and we must show by preponderance of evidence that the defense was negligent in their hiring and retention. The defense will try and argue that the manager of the mall, Jamie Brooks, couldn't have known that Mr. Jessup would act how he did on April 17th. But this is not the case. We will help prove this through 3 witnesses. First, you will hear from John Stewart himself. He will tell you about Mr. Jessup's aggressive actions on April 17th. And he will tell you about Mr. Jessup's aggressive actions before April 17th. And he will tell you that the mall did nothing about these aggressive actions. Next, you will hear from Teddy Exley, current Assistant Chief at the Miltonville Police Department. She will tell you why Mr. Jessup was fired from the police department. And she will tell you that all the reasons he was fired were written down in his exit interview. And she will tell you that the manager of the mall, Jamie Brooks, contacted her. And she will tell you that on this phone call, she told Jamie Brooks that she will send this exit interview. And she will tell you that the exit interview went through successfully. Listen carefully to this testimony and decide yourself if the mall shouldn't have seen the first red flag. Lastly, you will hear from Tony Jessup. He is testifying for the plaintiff because he believes that his actions on April 17th were in his usual conduct, red flag. He will tell you about working at the mall and how he received numerous complaints that the mall did not properly address, another red flag. And he will tell you about a list of weapons that he submitted to Jamie Brooke. And on this list included hand batons, rubber bullet guns, and phasers, another red flag. He will tell you that he was told not to bring his phaser to the mall, but he brought it to the mall several more times with the mall's knowledge, a last red flag. The last time Tony Jessup brought his phaser to the mall was on April 17th when it was used to phase Mr. Stewart in the back. For the mall, it was too late. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we trust that you will listen carefully to the testimony given today, and that you will identify all the red flags raised in this case, and thus grant John Stewart his due relief. Thank you for your time and attention.
Good afternoon. Carly Corners is a recently renovated mall in Miltonville. Due to the recession, many tenants have had to close their businesses in the mall, leaving the buildings in the mall vacant, thus having vacant buildings causing the crime rate to increase. When the crime rate increased, Miltonville had to hire a head of security. Jamie Brooks, the mall manager, hired Lieutenant Jessup with all necessary protocol. In doing so, that will be proven today. Once he was hired, many policies at the mall were established for the betterment of the mall. Lieutenant Jessup wanted to put weapons into the policies. Lieutenant Jessup wanted to add weapons into the policies. Jamie Brooks, however, explicitly told Lieutenant Jessup that you cannot add weapons into the policies. The evidence will show that the mall did its job and it was not negligent in the hiring of Lieutenant Jessup. Thank you.
All right, the plaintiff may call your first witness.
The plaintiff calls John Stewart to the stand.
Mr. Stewart, I remind you that you're still under oath.
Please state your name for the court.
My name is John Stewart.
Where do you live?
I live in Miltonville.
Where do you work?
I don't work anymore. I'm retired.
What did you do before you retired?
Well, I worked with the Army Corps of Engineers for 40-something years as a contractor.
Now that you're retired, what do you usually do during the day?
Well, I used to walk around the mall with my buddy Max Truly, but I can't anymore since I broke my hip.
How did you break your hip?
I was phased by that man over there.
Who is that man?
That's Tony Jessup.
Did you know Mr. Jessup before he broke your hip?
Yeah, we'd had a couple run-ins at the mall.
Which mall is that?
The mall at Crowley Corners.
What is Mr. Jessup's role in the mall?
He's the head of, or he was the head of security.
Did you go to the mall often before Mr. Jessup was hired?
Yeah, I did.
And did you notice any changes in the mall after he was hired?
Yeah. We added a lot of new security. Everything seemed more militaristic.
Have you ever had any problems with the security at the mall?
I have, and I've written complaints about it.
Did you have any problems or complaints before Mr. Jessup was hired?
No, not one.
Let the record reflect I'm now showing opposing counsel what is previously marked as Exhibit 7B, D, and E. Could you identify these for the court?
These are the complaints I wrote.
Your Honor, I now offer Exhibits 7B, D, and E into evidence. Their authenticity has been stipulated by Stipulation 10.
Any objection?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Response.
Under Rule 801, this is not hearsay because part of the statements come from Mr. Stewart, so it's not out of court because he is here to testify to it, and part of the statements come from Jamie Brooke, who is also here to testify and is a party opponent.
Any response?
No.
I'll admit it's Exhibit 7B, C, and E into the evidence at this time.
B, D, and E.
B, D, and E into evidence at this time.
What's the date of the earliest exhibit?
February 16th, 2014.
And what prompted you to write that complaint?
I remember this. I was standing at the bottom of the escalator one day when a security guard comes up to me and he starts yelling at me, saying that I'm creating a security hazard just by standing there.
Were there any other customers around the escalator?
No, I was the only one there.
What's the date of Exhibit 7E?
March 30th, 2014.
Was Mr. Jessup involved in that incident?
Yeah, it was.
Why did you write that complaint?
Well, I was sitting in front of Delaney's like I sometimes do, and he comes up to me and he starts yelling at me, saying that I'm talking too loud, yelling for talking too loud.
And what's the date of the final exhibit, 7D?
March 20th, 2014.
Was Mr. Jessup involved in that incident?
He was.
Why did you write that complaint?
Well, I came out to my car to find a parking ticket written by Mr. Jessup under my windshield wiper.
Why did you complain about him writing you a parking ticket?
Well, he can't write me a parking ticket. He's not a cop.
Now, how soon did you make these complaints after the events occurred?
Right after.
And did you see any change in security after you wrote them?
Well, I didn't get another parking ticket, but no.
Moving on to the morning of April 17th, the morning you broke your hip, what did you do that morning?
Well, it was just like any other morning, I guess. I remember it was raining that day, so I parked closer to the mall.
Do you know Justice Delaney?
I do.
Have you ever had any problems with her about parking?
Well, she did come and try and yell at me one time for parking in one of her spots, but we talked about it and we had an understanding that she wasn't going to talk to me about it again.
Your Honor, let the record reflect I am now showing opposing counsel what has previously been marked as Exhibit 1. Could you identify this for the court?
Sure. Yeah, this is a map of the mall.
Your Honor, I now offer Exhibit 1 into evidence. Its authenticity has been stipulated by Stipulation 8.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 1 is admitted.
Could you please show the jury where you usually walk around the mall?
See, we usually come in here at the main entrance, and then we'd start walking around the mall, the bottom half, and right here in front of Delaney's, that's where he stopped me.
Who stopped you?
Jessup.
Do you know why he stopped you?
Well, he came at me screaming and hollering about a parking job.
How did you respond to him yelling at you?
Well, after he backed me into a chair and got all in my face, I poked him on the shoulder and I told him to get a grip.
Did you knock Mr. Jessup over?
No, I didn't.
How did he respond to being poked?
Well, he was so shocked that somebody finally stood up to him that he fell right over.
What did you do after he fell?
Oh, I walked away. I was done with him.
Were you going to leave the mall?
I was.
Did you get a chance to leave the mall?
No, he got up off the ground and phased me right in the back.
Is that how you broke your hip?
It is.
Was Mr. Jessup fired from the mall after this event?
He was.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
So you go to the Closet Corners Mall to walk, right?
Yes.
Before the incident between you and Lieutenant Jessup, did you had problems with parking in Delaney's parking spaces before, correct?
Yeah, I read those.
So you were aware that on the day of the incident that you were taking one of Delaney's parking spaces, right?
Yes, but like I said earlier, Delaney and I talked about it, and it wasn't supposed to be a problem anymore.
So you knew about Lieutenant Jessup's prior hostility, correct?
Oh, yeah. I wrote complaints about it.
So you wanted Lieutenant Jessup gone, right?
Well, I couldn't say I liked him there, but yeah, you could say that.
And you knew about Lieutenant Jessup's prior hostility, but you poked him anyway.
Well, he did back me into a chair and get in my face, so I felt like I had to get him out of my way.
But you poked him anyway, correct?
I just said that, yes.
So when you were confronted by Lieutenant Jessup, did you refuse to remove your car from the parking space, right?
Well, I just wanted him to get out of my way.
But did you refuse to move your car?
I didn't get a chance to. I mean, he was standing right there, and before I knew it, I'd been phased in the back.
Okay. Can I refresh the witness' memory by offering him his statement?
Are you trying to impeach the witness?
No.
Okay. You may attempt to refresh the witness's recollection.
I'm sorry, Anna. We don't have a copy that's not been altered. So, let me rephrase my question. Okay, so when you were confronted by Lieutenant Jessup, did you say, "Get out of my way," when he told you to remove your car from the parking space?
Yeah, after he backed me into a chair, yeah, I told him to get out of my way.
So, did you refuse to move your car from the parking space?
Yes, I did.
And on the day of that incident, your vehicle's front end encroached on the fire lane, correct?
Well, Cadillac Eldorado's a big car. Sometimes it gets an inch over the line, but I didn't notice.
But it did encroach on the fire lane,
I
correct?
just said that, yeah.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Did you have any trouble getting past Mr. Jessup when he had backed you into a chair?
Yeah, I couldn't get past him. He was standing right there.
And did you try to leave the confrontation to move your car?
I did. That's where I was going.
Did you get a chance to move your car?
No, I didn't. When I tried to, he got up and phased me in the back.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
The witness is excused. You may step down. Call your next witness.
The plaintiff calls Teddy Exley to the stand.
Ms. Exley, I remind you that you're still under oath.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is Teddy Exley.
And what do you do for a living, Ms. Exley?
I'm the Assistant Chief at the Miltonville Police Department.
Can you tell us some of your responsibilities as Assistant Chief?
I deal mostly with administrative duties.
What position did you hold before you were Assistant Chief?
Well, in the police force, you have to work your way up the ranks, so started as a patrol officer, lieutenant, and now Assistant Chief.
Now, Ms. Exley, did you know Lieutenant Jessup?
I did.
And how did you know him?
We worked together as lieutenants.
Did you work with him directly?
Yes, we went on several calls together.
What did you think of his policing style?
I believe that his policing style should not be used in any security setting.
Why would you say this?
Well, he developed his policing methods from Captain Smith, whose motto was to pull out a gun and ask questions later. That should not be used in any security setting.
And can you give us an example of a time when his methods caused him trouble at the police force?
Yes, he had this weird... Anyone got even close to him, he'd grab onto his gun and get all nervous.
Now, Miss Exley, do you know why Lieutenant Jessup was fired from the police force?
Yes, I was involved in the decision.
And how did this start?
It started with an incident that occurred.
What was the police force doing there?
We were mostly there for crowd control.
And did the crowd stay under control?
For the most part they did, but then when the final touchdown was scored, all the crowds rushed onto the field and things got a little rowdy then.
What did Lieutenant Jessup do?
Lieutenant Jessup released tear gas and everyone started running around and panicking. It was terrible.
Was there any indication that this tear gas was going to be released?
No, there was no warning at all. I didn't even have my mask on.
Was anyone hurt in this incident?
Yes, several kids were shot with beanbag bullets with purple welts on their skin and our eyes were red and watery.
Was Lieutenant Jessup fired because of this high school incident?
No, he wasn't, because we wanted to see if Captain Smith's behaviors were influencing Lieutenant Jessup's behaviors.
And were Captain Smith's behaviors influencing Lieutenant Jessup?
No, this was just how Jessup chose to do police work, or any security work for that matter.
Why did he get fired?
Well, after a while, he started getting really nitpicky about very little things, like jaywalking and parking violations, and we had to let him go.
And did you write down any of his reasons for being fired anywhere?
Yes, of course. I put it in the exit interview.
Let the record reflect, I am now showing Exhibit 5A, B, and C to opposing counsel. Assistant Chief Exley, can you identify these documents?
Yes, 5A is the facts cover sheet of the exit interview, 5B is the exit interview itself, and 5C is the facts transmission report of the exit interview.
Your Honor, I'd now like to offer Exhibits 4A, B, and C into evidence. Its authenticity has been stipulated under Stipulation 10 as a record of business activity.
Did you mean 5A through C?
5A through C.
All right. Any objection from the defense? No. 5A, 5B, and 5C have been admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can I direct your attention to the reviewer's addendum at the bottom of 5B? Who wrote this paragraph?
I did.
And what is it about?
It's about the reasons in which we chose to fire Jessup.
And can you tell us some of the reasons why?
Yes, there were several, about his morale problems with coworkers, his personal space issues I mentioned earlier, his difficulty transitioning to a new command staff, and then his overzealous attitude for parking violations and jaywalking.
And in this exit interview, how did you describe his policing style?
I said that when Jessup is faced with any adverse situation, or even situations that aren't adverse to the average individual, he responded by using unnecessary excessive force.
Thank you. Now turning your attention to Carly Corners Mall. Have they ever made contact with you?
Yes, the mall manager called me.
And who is the mall manager?
Jamie Brooke.
Why did Jamie Brooke call you?
Brooke wanted to see if I thought Jessup was a good fit as a mall cop.
And what did you tell her?
I told her that he played by all the rules and that he took his job very seriously.
Did you send her anything?
Yes, I sent her the exit interview.
Will the record reflect I am now showing exhibits 4, A, B, and C to opposing counsel? Can you identify these documents for the court, please?
Yes. 4A is the fax cover sheet for the termination letter. 4B is the termination letter itself. And 4C is the fax transmission report for the termination letter.
Your Honor, I'd now like to offer exhibits 4A, B, and C into evidence as authenticity has been stipulated under stipulation 10 as a business document.
Any objection? No. Exhibits 4A, 4B, and 4C have been admitted.
Thank you. On the fax transmission sheets of the exit interview and the termination letter, what does it say on top?
If you look here, it says transmission okay, meaning that both of them went through successfully.
Now returning back to this phone call with Jamie Brooke, what did you mention anything else?
Yes, I'd asked if Brooke knew about the Milton County High School incident because it'd been all in the news and papers, and surprisingly enough, she hadn't.
And how did you perceive her tone of voice during the phone call?
She seemed so uninterested in anything I had to say. Her voice was dull and monotone, and she was rushing to get off the phone.
Now turning your attention to April 17th, do you know about the events that took place?
Yes, a 911 call was made to the police force.
And what was this 911 call about?
It was about Jessup at the mall, phasing an old man in the back.
And did this surprise you at all?
Not at all. It was just a classic Jessup going for a weapon, even in the slightest of a conflict.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Yes. In reference to your phone call with Miss Brooks or Mr. Brooks, you stated that you were extremely tired.
I wasn't extremely tired. I had to have a long day, and so I was, a little bit tired, but that doesn't affect how I do my work.
So if Jessup was such a large problem, do you think that you would have remembered before the acetylcholine, as you put it, kicked in?
Objection, Your Honor. Defense is bringing in evidence that no foundation has been laid.
Well, it's the statement that was submitted or that you gave. There is no reason to need to submit it.
Is there a response?
Yes, under 45, she was assuming facts not in evidence that Lieutenant Exley was on acetylcholine.
Acetylcholine is an inhibitor found naturally in the body. There is no need.
Your Honor, I would ask that the defense first lay a foundation asking my witness to establish that she was taking acetylcholine.
I'm going to sustain that objection, counsel. If you want to bring in that evidence, you're going to have to lay the proper foundation for it.
Thank you, Your Honor.
True that due to your simple lack of attention, that you may not have remembered everything dealing with Lieutenant Jessup?
I did not have any lack of attention. I don't have a lack of attention. That's why I do my job very well, because I'm extremely focused on details and I'm very oriented in doing my job to the best of my ability.
In your statement, Let's present your statement.
Can I see it? Can you get an unmarked one?
Do you have one that I'll get for you?
Yes.
Let's present the statement. Paragraph 8 goes right with the conversation. So in line 70, you were saying that you were trying to be diplomatic in your reason for telling the whole truth, correct?
Yes, I was diplomatic in telling the whole truth.
Isn't it true that during this conversation, based on your statement, that you and both Ms. Brooks were very tired and uninterested?
I was not very tired. I was a little tired, and I certainly wasn't uninterested. I take my job very seriously. All phone calls that I take seriously. This doesn't say in my statement that I didn't. It said that I had other things that I was doing because I'm the assistant chief of the Miltonville Police Department. I have lots of things that I have to do. It does not mean I did not take this seriously.
Knowing Jessup and Stewart, do you really believe that they could have talked it out as stated in line
Objection,
98?
Your Honor. Under Rule 602, this question is asking for personal knowledge that this witness lacks.
This witness does have it as stated in the statement. You were the officer that personally arrested Jean Stewart.
Is this an objection? Or are we doing...
Sir, witness, you can't make objections.
No, I thought... Is
Yeah.
my lawyer making an objection?
Yeah, I'm gonna rule.
Okay,
You have to
thank
wait
you.
and let me rule. The objection was that you have elicited testimony from this witness that this witness does not have personal knowledge. If there's a question you want to ask regarding John Stewart, you're going to have to lay the foundation of how this witness knows John Stewart. I'm going to sustain the objection, but you can try to lay the foundation to get into that information.
Thank you, Your Honor.
According to your statement, you were one of the officers that arrested Jean Stewart.
Objection, Your Honor. Under Rule 404B, defense is referring to an incident that was a prior crime and that cannot be used in evidence.
Do you have a response, counsel?
It was submitted in evidence with the statement that information is valid.
Okay. How's the information that this witness arrested John Stewart, how's that relevant to the case?
It goes into showing how they knew each other in some form or fashion.
Okay. I'll allow it on a limited basis. Objection overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So knowing a little bit about Jean Stewart from this incident where you needed to arrest him, do you believe that he and Jessup would have clashed in any way?
They possibly could have clashed, but as I say, the mind is the only weapon without a holster, and so it could have easily just been talked out between the two. There was no need to phase an old man on his walk in the mall because of a simple conflict.
Isn't it true that during the incident stated before, both Jean Stewart, he was, well, rather unable to come about with a sane solution to a problem due to alcohol?
Objection, Your Honor. 602, lack of personal knowledge. My witness was not at the event that defense is referring to.
I'm going to sustain that objection.
The incident I was referring to, I'm sorry if I did not state it, is the one in which you arrested Jean Stewart.
I will instruct the witness not to answer. He can only go into that limited just to show the knowledge. That's the reason that you gave, that you wanted to introduce that. So the particulars about that incident, the witness cannot go into without some more foundation of how it's relevant go into. So I'll have to sustain that objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So, aside from everything, in the case with the police department and the high school, isn't it true that the police department was not found to be guilty of any wrongdoing?
I don't believe that is in my statement. However, we did have a federal investigation, and because of that, Captain Smith was let go.
So it was a problem with one person, correct?
No, there were several officers there, Jessup being one of the ones who released the tear gas, who shot kids with beanbag bullets, leaving them bruised, and a dog was trampled. That was not an incident because of just one. That was the responsibility of the police department. We had a talk, and we rebuilt the police department based off that foundation.
But isn't it true that Captain Smith was the only person fired at first?
Yes, he was the only one fired from this because we believe that he was part of the main problem of this incident.
If the management company is at fault for this incident, isn't it true that the police department in its entirety would have been at fault?
Objection, Your Honor. Under Rule 602, my witness would have no personal knowledge about what would happen.
You have a response?
No, it's fine.
Are you going to withdraw the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
No further questions.
Is your timer working? Or did it?
It keeps stopping.
Okay. So if you don't mind, if you two can share, since her timer is not working properly. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Exley, on the phone call with Ms. Brooks, were you alert at the time?
Absolutely, I'm always alert and stay on my guard.
And did the fact that it was at the end of your shift hinder your ability to communicate information?
No, it did not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross?
No.
You're excused, may step down.
Thank
You
you.
may call your next witness.
The plaintiff calls Lieutenant Tony Jessup to the stand. Your Honor, I would like to note that under Stipulation 11, Tony Jessup can be treated as a hostile witness, and I will be with leading questions.
I will take up that matter. I'll ask that you first direct Mr. Jessup, and if he comes non-responsive, then you may treat him as a hostile witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Please state your name to the court.
My name is Lieutenant Tony Jessup.
You say lieutenant. Did you serve in the military?
Yes, served in the Marines for 4 years in a security detail.
And what did you do after you served in the Marines?
After serving in the Marines, I became a police officer.
And who were you serving under when you achieved your rank of lieutenant?
So under Captain Dudley Smith, the greatest captain the police force has seen, in my opinion.
Why was he so great?
Because he believed in the proper way to do police work with nightsticks, phasers, pepper spray, things like that.
Do you agree in those same kind of methods?
Of course, tough justice is the only justice.
Does Captain Smith still work at the police department?
No, he was fired.
Do you still work at the police department?
I do not either now.
Take a look at Exhibit 4B. I believe it's already been admitted. You were given 2 reasons why you were terminated from the, oh wait, please read this document.
Well, this is my letter of termination.
And you were given 2 reasons why you were terminated from the force, weren't you?
Yes.
And those reasons were failure to respect the integrity of the command structure and failure to follow orders of the immediate supervisor. And upon receiving this letter, you were given 2 options, correct?
Yes.
And what were those options?
To file an appeal to the Miltonville Civilian Review Panel, and also not to contest the decision.
And which did you choose?
I did not contest the decision.
Why didn't you contest the decision?
Well, although I thought my termination was unjustified, I decided to move on. The police force had changed.
How had it changed?
Well, I mean, after the regime shift changed, when Mr. Smith had been fired, Miss Exley was promoted, and I didn't like her way of doing things.
What did you do after you were terminated from the Miltonville Police Department?
After that, I heard that the mall at Calling Corner is looking for a new head of security, so I applied.
And who interviewed you for the job?
Miss Brooke.
And how did the interview process go?
Well, I was pretty forthright about my prior termination. She said it was more of a kind of a formality. She said she was really excited to have me.
So she was completely aware that you were terminated from your past job?
Yes, I was very forthright with my prior termination.
And you also had a Mall Merchants Association meeting that you went to, correct?
Yes.
And at this meeting, everyone also knew there that you were terminated from your past job, correct?
Yeah, I was pretty forthright about it.
And you got the job, didn't you?
That is correct.
But when you came to the mall, what was the shape of its security?
It was in a state of disarray. You know, there's a lot of teenage hoodlums loitering, flash mobbing, listening to music, and intimidating mall patrons.
How seriously did you take your job there?
Took my job very seriously. In fact, I made and took a sworn oath to defend the mall.
So you must have had some requests that you had for the mall upon going there, since the security was so bad.
Yes, I had some equipment requests that definitely beef up malls, public safety, and mall security.
Your Honor, I'm now showing opposing counsel what's been previously marked as Exhibit 6. Could you please read aloud what this document is?
Yes, this is a memo I sent to Ms. Brooke about some officer equipment, things that would really help mall security.
Your Honor, I now offer Exhibit 6 into evidence, the authenticity of which has been stipulated in Stipulation 1.
Any objection? Exhibit 6 is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. You requested a 26-inch ASP airweight expandable baton,
Yes.
an ASP tactical rigid handcuffs,
Yes, black preferably.
Streamlight Pro Tac HL flashlights,
Correct.
Law Pro neoprene cut-resistant uniform gloves with carrying pouch,
Yes.
a Saber Red Mark 9 crowd management pepper spray,
Yes, of course.
and a Phaser X2 conducted electrical weapon with accompanying holster.
Most definitely, I feel like that's probably the most important for preserving public safety and security and defense of myself and my men.
But Ms. Brooke didn't accept all these requests, did she?
She denied some of the probably more useful ones, like the baton, pepper spray, and the phaser.
And even though she denied the Phaser, you still brought it in sometimes, didn't you?
Well, I brought my own phaser because every now and then I had a feeling something bad might go on that day.
Which was a complete disrespect, which is completely disobeying her orders, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, I felt that since she hired me to be head of mall security, I knew best for mall security, and I thought that a phaser was helpful.
While you were at the mall, were there ever any complaints made about you?
Well, people complain about everything.
Your Honor, I've now shown opposing counsel what has been previously marked as Exhibits 7A and 7C. Could you please identify these two documents for the jury?
There are two complaints made against my security department.
Your Honor, I now offer Exhibits 7A and 7C to evidence the authenticity of which have been stipulated in Stipulation 1.
Any objection?
Objection, hearsay.
Response?
As we have talked about earlier, these exhibits are stipulated in Stipulation 10 to be business records conducted in an orderly fashion and are admissible in hearsay.
Well, if you're going to come in under the business records exception, you have to lay the proper foundation, and right now I don't think you've done so through this witness. So I'm going to sustain the objection. You can try to readmit them once you've laid the proper foundation. So sustain, they're not admitted.
There were complaints made about you at the mall, weren't there?
Yes.
And these complaints were made by patrons of the mall, correct?
Well, I mean, people would go to the mall, patrons at the mall, yes.
And they were complaining to Miss Brooke, who is the owner of the mall, correct?
Right, with yes, correct.
And as the owner of the mall, she responded to them in the orderly fashion that normally would happen to conduct in a business record situation.
Yes, that's correct.
Your Honor, I now offer Exhibits 7A and 7C to evidence the authenticity of which have been stipulated in Stipulation 1.
Objection, hearsay.
Response?
I have just laid foundation, and we've gone over the stipulation that they are business records. Furthermore, since Ms. Brooke is the one who's who's responding to the complaints and she's a party opponent, it is also admissible.
I'm going to still sustain them. The foundation was not laid with this witness. You can try with Ms. Brooke, who is, if they're coming in under the business records, has to be the person who's responsible for keeping a catalog of those records, and you haven't established that with this witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Take a look at Exhibit 7B. This was admitted earlier.
Yes, right here.
This complaint was made on February 16, 2014, correct?
Yes.
And then there was another complaint made on March 20, 2014.
Correct.
7B. And another one made on March 30, 2014.
Yes.
And then going back earlier, February 5th, 2014,
Yes.
and March 3rd, 2014.
Correct.
That's 5 complaints in less than 2 months, correct?
Yes.
One complaint, the first, in Exhibit 7D, Mr. Stewart complained about you giving him a parking ticket, correct?
Well, yeah, that's the complaint right here.
And in response to this complaint, Ms. Brooke had a discussion with you, didn't she?
Yes.
And what was this discussion like?
Well, she simply told me that I was not to issue parking tickets, and that's basically all that happened in this particular discussion.
So she told you that instead of issuing parking tickets, you were supposed to address all parking concerns with patrons face-to-face, didn't she?
That is what she told me, that yes, that is what I wanted to do.
And you had to address parking concerns with patrons face-to-face another time, didn't you?
Correct.
And that was on the morning of April 17th.
Yes, with Mr. Stewart.
Did anything unusual happen on that morning?
Started off as a normal morning, addressing a parking concern by a habitual offender, and then I got a call from Ms. Delaney, and I confronted Mr. Stewart. Things got a bit out of the ordinary.
And you had your phaser with you on this day, didn't you?
That is correct, yes.
The same phaser that Ms. Brooke never punished you for bringing, right?
Yes, my only phaser.
And when you confronted Mr. Stewart, you had to use your phaser, didn't you?
Well, of course, I mean, he assaulted me and disrespected my direct orders.
But he didn't assault you, he only poked you.
He poked me, knocking me down. He disrespected my direct orders and was breaking the law by parking in a fire lane. So I had no choice.
And you faced him in the back, didn't you?
Right, because he was trying to escape the scene.
Because he was trying to leave the scene.
I had to serve justice. I had to do what I had to do.
You think that all of your actions at the mall were justified, don't you?
I know all of my actions were justified. I did the job that I was paid to do.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Jessup, so this isn't your first time serving as a civil servant, correct?
Correct.
And how long have you been a civil servant?
I mean, for a while now, ever since I was just got out of college, I went to the Marine Corps.
Okay, and so during your interview with Ms. Brooks, did you just voluntarily disclose your previous offenses?
My prior termination from the police department, you mean? I was
Yes.
pretty forthright about it. I mean, I didn't want to hide anything.
Okay. Did you, for lack of a better word, sugarcoat what you had done? Making it seem less of what it is?
I presented the information as it was. She's allowed to make her own opinions.
Okay, knowing your given history with crowds per se, did you think that this was the ideal job for you?
My
Objection, Your
history-
Honor. This is irrelevant under Rule 401.
No.
You have no response?
No response.
So are you going to withdraw the question?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Do you believe that violence was necessary? And do you believe violence is necessary in completing your job?
In preserving justice and public safety, well, at times I found that yes, it can be, it must be used.
During the incident, you violated Mr. Brooks' orders when it came for mall security and faces, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. This is a vague and ambiguous question.
Isn't it true that you violated Mr. Brooks' orders when it came to security and faces?
I'm going to overrule the objection. You can ask the question. You may answer the question.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, regarding your question, I mean, she did not like me having a phaser. She said that if I really needed to, I should consult the police, which I thought was very offensive and not put trust in my department. But again, as I said earlier, I did bring my phaser because I know what's best for public safety and mall security, which is why I was hired for the job.
So, do you believe that you followed the situation justifiably?
I did my job justifiably to ensure safety and make sure the laws were respected.
So do you think that Carly's Corners endorsed the decisions that you took, decisions that you made?
In shaping up the mall and preserving public safety, well, I mean, they did until they fired me, yes.
No further questions, Your Honor. Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. When you first came to the mall, Miss Brooke, when you were interviewing for the mall, Miss Brooke didn't seem to take the fact that you were fired from your past job very seriously, did she?
No, she said the interview was more of a formality. She told me she was excited to have me. She said my reputation preceded me. So she said it was more of a formality.
And when it came to all the complaints, she didn't take any of them seriously, did she?
Yes, eventually she started dismissing Mr. Stewart's complaints because he's a habitual complainer.
Thank you. No further questions.
Recross? You're excused. You may sit down.
Your Honor, the plaintiff rests.
All right, at this time, the plaintiff is rest. Defense, do you have any witnesses that you would like to call?
Your Honor, I would like to call Justice Delaney to the stand.
I remind you, Mr. Delay, that you're still under oath.
Can you state your name for the court, please?
Justice Delaney.
Justice Delaney, what did you do? What was your role at the College Corners Mall?
Well, I was the owner of Delaney's Doggy Daycare.
After the renovation and the rebranding of College Corners Mall, what was the crime like?
It was very high. It was loitering. Yeah.
What did you know about Lieutenant Jessup when you introduced him at the meet and greet?
Well, I know about the incident at the football field, but yeah, that's all I really know. But other than that, he's a good guy.
So why did you introduce Lieutenant Jessup to the other tenants?
Because we needed order, we needed justice in there because there was loitering. There was a lot of teens walking around and stuff, so I wanted to stop that.
So before the incident between Lieutenant Jessup and Gene Stewart, how did Lieutenant Jessup perform his job?
Objection, Your Honor. Under Rule 45, this assumes facts on evidence. There's no foundation to show that this witness knows about the confrontation between Mr. Jessup and Mr. Stewart.
Do you have a response, Counselor?
I can show my witness his testimony.
Do you have a response to the objection was that he doesn't know anything, that there's no way, you've shown that there's no way that he knows about what happened. Is there some way that he knows about what happened on that day?
Yes, it's in his testimony.
Okay, I'll give a little latitude for her to lay the foundation, and then if there's still a problem, you may renew your objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may I show Justice Delaney his testimony?
His testimony, he's testifying today, are you referring to a statement?
Yes.
Okay. You may show opposing counsel, you may, if the witness's memory needs to be refreshed, then you can show the statement.
Permission to see what she's shown.
Yes, make sure you show opposing counsel.
This is a double-sided document. Could she show this copy because it's not double-sided?
Is there something, is it the same statement?
No, it has a different statement on the back.
Okay.
Just like Jimmy Brooks. Use this one.
Okay, Justice Delaney. May I approach the witness?
could identify for the record what it is, what the document is that you're showing the witness.
I'm showing the witness his statement about the incident. Can you read this?
A moment after I got up to the rail, I can see Gene eventually. He's walking toward the lanes between Gators and the chairs. Then I heard Lieutenant Jeffs bark at Gene to stop. Max took a few steps, but Gene spun around to his face. Lieutenant Jeffs, I hear Lieutenant Jeffs tell Gene
Objection, Your Honor.
Oh, hold on. What's the objection?
This is a narrative. I would ask that they break down questions.
Counsel, do you have a question? I'm going to sustain that objection. Do you have a question?
Okay, so
Thank you.
in the statement, does it say that you were aware of the incident that happened between Gene Stewart and Lieutenant Jessup?
Yes, I saw it.
So, why did you introduce Lieutenant? Before the incident, before the incident between Lieutenant Jessup and Gene Stewart, how did Lieutenant Jessup perform his job?
The crime rate had decreased. There was no lowering. There wasn't any hoodlums walking around because he was telling them to take off their headphones and stuff.
So, how did this event? Well, how did the hiring of Lieutenant Jessup affect the crime at Carly Farms?
It decreased miraculously.
So, after the incident between Lieutenant Jessup and Gene Stewart, what happened to Lieutenant Jessup?
He was fired.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. So you personally picked Mr. Jessup for the role of security guard at the Carly Corners Mall, right?
Yes.
And you knew about the marching band stampede at Milton County High School, didn't you?
Yes, but he was just doing his job.
But you knew Mr. Jessup was involved, correct?
Yes.
And you organized the meet and greet, right, between the tenants?
Yes.
And at the meet and greet, you said to Jamie Brooke that you were ready to pat Mr. Jessup on the back.
Yes.
And in response to this, she said, you can't touch a person like Jessup, correct?
Yes.
After the meet and greet, Mr. Jessup was hired, wasn't he?
Yes.
And when he worked at the mall, he made kids take off their headphones, right?
Yes.
And he broke up any groups larger than 3.
Yes.
And when people didn't cooperate with him, he took them to the mall office, didn't he?
Yes.
And he fingerprinted them and took their picture.
I don't recall.
Mr. Jessup fingerprinted and took pictures of people who didn't cooperate with him, right?
I don't recall.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance?
Relevance? What's your response, counsel?
I'm trying to show the jury how Mr. Jessup was like when he worked at the mall.
I believe the question has already been asked and answered, so I'm going to sustain the objection and ask that you move on.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. People complained about Mr. Jessup, isn't that right?
Yes.
Now, on the morning of April 17th, when Mr. Stewart parked in your spot, you called Mr. Jessup about him, didn't you?
Yes, because reserved parking spots for only my customers.
And when you call him about someone in your spot, he used to call a tow truck if they don't move their car. Isn't that right?
Yes.
On that morning, when you called him, Mr. Jessup said, I'll get him this time. This will be the last time we have a problem with him. Isn't it? Didn't he?
Yes, because he's doing his job.
Now, when you saw the confrontation between Mr. Stewart and Mr. Jessup, you saw Mr. Stewart try to push past and leave the confrontation, didn't you?
No, it looked like he was talking back.
But you did see him try to push past Mr. Jessup, right?
He poked him.
And you didn't see Mr. Jessup fall over, did you?
No.
But you did see Mr. Jessup take out his phaser and phase Gene Stewart in the back.
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
You may step down. You're excused. Call your next witness.
I'd like to, the defense would like to call Miss Jane Brooks to the stand, please. Miss Brooks, please explain to us about why you came down to Miltonville.
Well, the reason I came to Miltonville, Georgia is because my mother was experiencing some health issues.
What were you doing before?
Well, I went to New York to go to a community college. I majored in management.
Okay, and what is your relationship with Miltonville Mall now, or Carly's Corner?
I'm a manager of the mall.
And what is your job there? What is your job as manager?
My job is to hire, fire, and train my personnel.
Okay, and how do you, what is your hiring process?
Well, I look at the resume. I look at the resumes to see if they qualify for the job.
Okay, and for Mr. Jessup, how does that hiring process go?
Can you repeat that,
For
please?
Mr. Jessup, how was that hiring process? How did you go about that?
He qualified majorly. He had experience.
Who did you confer with?
Captain Smith. Can you?
Who all did you speak with to talk about Mr. Jessup and his qualities and his experience and such?
Captain Smith and Lieutenant Exley.
What did you and Lieutenant Exley speak about?
Basically nothing but Lieutenant Jessup. He was a good person. He was great at what he did.
Okay, so after he was hired, did anything change at the mall?
Yes, it did.
What changed?
Well, basically, before Lieutenant Jessup came along, the security wasn't the best. So after he came along, things got much more better. You know, our security wasn't, it upgraded a lot.
Okay, so in your opinion, how was Mr. Jessup? What's he like to you?
He's a hard worker, you know.
And did any other additional information had come about? What would you, good or bad, what would you have?
It depends what it would be.
Okay, no further questioning, Your Honor.
Any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Miss Brooke, you're mall supervisor at Carly Corners Mall, right?
Yes.
And part of your job is to see if an applicant is fit to be an employee for the mall.
Correct.
And you hired Mr. Jessup, correct?
Yes.
And you said you went through all the proper steps in hiring him?
Yes.
Protocol says that you have to take Mr. Jessup to the Mall Merchants Association to be reviewed, right?
Yes.
And in addition to that, you have to call the applicant's 3 references.
Right.
But when you came to Mr. Jessup's application, you called Captain Dudley Smith, right?
Yes.
And he was retired at the time?
Yes.
And you said you didn't even need to call another witness after that.
Yes.
But then you did call Lieutenant Exley.
Right.
And on this phone call with Miss Exley, she said she would send his exit interview.
Right.
Did you receive this exit interview?
Yes, I did.
But you didn't think that that was any tip-off for Mr. Jessup's behavior?
No, not really.
Can you turn to that exit interview, please?
Sure.
It's exhibit 4, 5 feet.
4, 5 feet.
5 feet.
Okay.
5 feet. Can you go down to the reviewer's addendum?
Oh, this is 70, I'm sorry. 5, 8.
It's a staple one.
This staple. This one right here. Can
Yeah, can you turn to the reviewer's addendum? It's on the second page at the bottom. In her comments, Ms. Exley states some of the reasons why Mr. Jessup was fired was his personal space issue and his aggressiveness, correct?
Right?
And you say you received this document?
Yes.
Lieutenant Exley was the second person you called, correct?
Right.
But this was it. You didn't call any other references?
No, I didn't.
But protocol says you need to call 3.
I know.
So despite not finishing this application process, you hired Lieutenant Jessup, correct?
Yes.
And even after hiring him, you said yourself that he seemed a bit odd.
Yes, I said that.
And part of his policing style used police techniques that Carly corners them all.
Right?
And some of these techniques included fingerprinting, photographing people, and putting up a most wanted sign.
I don't recall. I don't recall.
But do you recall this list of weapons that Mr. Jessup submitted to you?
Yes, I do.
And on this list of weapons was hand batons,
Yes.
rubber bullet guns,
Yes.
and phasers?
Yes.
Did you allow him to have any of these?
No, I did not.
But he still brought his phaser to the mall, right?
Right.
And he brought it not only once, but multiple times.
Yes.
So you knew he had his phaser at the mall more than once?
I did not. I didn't know. Sometimes he would, I'm pretty sure he would bring it behind my back without me knowing it.
But you told him several times that he had to keep the phaser away.
Yes, I did.
And also you received complaints about Lieutenant Jessup, correct?
Yes.
Let the record reflect I am now showing Exhibits 7A and 7C to opposing counsel. Under Exhibit 7A is a complaint about Lieutenant Jessup, correct?
Yes.
These are the documents I just gave you.
Yes.
And this complaint is about Lieutenant Jessup stopping a fight by kneeing a teenager in the back who wasn't even part of the fight.
I don't recall.
You can read what the complaint was.
Yes. Yes.
And can you turn to 7C? This is another complaint about Lieutenant Jessup.
Yes.
And this complaint is about Lieutenant Jessup screaming at a 3-year-old who was crying because he lost his boredom.
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Your excuse may step down, thank you. Does the defense have another witness you'd like to call?
Yes, Your Honor. We would like to call Max Truman.
Ms. Truly, I remind you, you're still under oath.
Please state your name for the court.
Max Truly.
And how are you associated with the mom?
I used to own a charcuterie there. Sold sausages.
Being an ex-tenant of the mall, were you satisfied with the hiring of Lieutenant Jessup?
Yes, I thought he did an excellent job of keeping the rampant teenage loiterers away from my store.
Do you believe that Brooks knew about Jessup's involvement in the band incident?
You repeat the question?
Do you
Objection,
believe...
Your Honor. She has no personal knowledge as to whether or not Brooke knew about the incident.
I'm going to hold your question. Since the witness asked her to repeat the question, I don't know if she does or does not have any personal knowledge. So first I'll allow her to repeat the question.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Do you simply believe that Brooks knew about Jessup's involvement with the band incident?
Now you may make your objection.
Objection, Your Honor. Not only is it irrelevant what her opinion is on, under Rule 602, it is irrelevant her belief of whether or not Brooke knew about the incident, and is also there's a lack of personal knowledge as to whether or not she would know.
Your response?
She would have some knowledge of the hiring process and of the incident or of the conversations taking place due to the fact that she was one of the tenants at the mall and was involved in the greeting in the meeting that they held.
I'm gonna overrule the objection on the basis that she has personal knowledge because she was a tenant and would have been a part of the process.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So I'll allow it.
I can't say for sure, but I do believe that Brooks, being a careful member of the Merchants Association, would not hire someone he believed to be harmful to the mall.
Can you tell us a little bit about the walks you and Stewart went on?
Yes, they became daily after I left the mall. We weren't necessarily friends, but his companionship was welcome.
Does Stewart usually lace his drinks with go-go juice?
Objection, Your Honor. Go-go juice is a vague and ambiguous term that could mislead the jury.
And I will clarify in a moment as soon as the witness answers the question.
Your Honor, I would appreciate if opposing counsel talk to the judge and not me.
So is your objection that the question is vague?
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm gonna overrule the question she can answer.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And from now on, you direct your responses to the judge, not to opposing counsel.
So to clarify, I am allowed to answer that?
You're allowed to answer. Okay.
Go-go juice being alcohol, to clarify. I do believe he was lacing his slushies more often than not on the walks.
Stewart reportedly put on mentholatum, which is actually similar to Vicks Vapor Rub. Do you know the difference between the smell and alcohol?
Being in the meatpacking industry my entire professional life and opening my own sausage shop, I used alcohol-based cleaners nearly every day to clean my counter, so I'd say I'm very familiar with the scent of alcohol.
Can you tell the jury what mentholatum is or the smell compared to alcohol?
I believe it's in the same realm as Vicks Vapor Rub, but I'm not an official on menthol.
Is it possible that the alcohol or go-go juice, aside from the force of the phaser, played a role in how hard Stewart fell?
Based on personal experience and general knowledge with alcohol, I do believe it can impair balance pretty significantly.
How hard was the so-called poke that Jessup received?
Objection, Your Honor. Since under Rule 602, she would have no personal knowledge as to how hard the poke was, since she was neither the recipient nor the giver of the poke.
I'm going to sustain that objection. You may not answer that question.
Being there next to Mr. Stewart, what was the interaction that you witnessed?
Stewart poked Jessup, and Jessup seemed to reel quite significantly into a chair.
Do you believe that Jessup's actions were justified?
I believe he did what he thought was right in the situation, and given the personal physical aggression, I think he made the right choice.
What would your reaction have been to
Objection,
the
Your Honor.
confrontation?
Her reaction was irrelevant. This case is about the negligence of the law and the retention of Lieutenant Jessup, along with the hiring of Lieutenant Jessup.
I'm going to sustain that objection. You cannot answer that question.
Thank you, Your Honor.
No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Your Honor, I'm now showing opposing counsel Max Truly's statement. This is your statement, correct?
Yes.
You can take a look. This is, you signed and swore that this was your statement at 11:38 a.m. on November 10th, 2014, correct?
I believe you.
And you swore again that this was your statement and was truthful at 8 a.m. on this day, correct?
Yes.
Now, if you will, you just said in your direct examination that go-go juice was alcohol, correct?
Yes.
Can you please look in your statement and tell me where anywhere in the statement it says that you mentioned alcohol and you mentioned go-go juice being alcohol?
I don't believe I specifically specified the nature of go-go juice.
Thank you. You've been walking the mall for a while now, haven't you?
Yes.
And you know Mr. Stewart from walking the mall, correct?
Yes,
But you also know him from back when you owned your store, your charcuterie, correct?
yes.
And you blame Mr. Stewart for the closing of your charcuterie, don't you?
I do not.
But you think he was one of the reasons why it closed. You say that he was an avid complainer and that his actions didn't help, correct?
I said they didn't help, but I don't think he's a direct proponent of the closing of my store.
You don't think that he was one of the 2 reasons why it closed?
I think that he certainly wasn't helpful to my public relations with my customers, but I don't believe he was the reason.
Now, you said you were at the Mall Merchants Association. You're part of the Mall Merchants Association, correct?
Yes.
And so you were at the Mall Merchants Association meeting for Lieutenant Jessup, correct?
Yes.
And at this meeting, Justice Delaney said that he wanted to give a pat on the back to Lieutenant Jessup, didn't he?
Yes.
And in response to this, Miss Brooks said, "Be careful, JD. You can't touch a person like Jessup and expect to get away with it," didn't she?
She did.
You got to know Lieutenant Jessup fairly well, correct?
I wouldn't say fairly well.
But you're able to
I do.
describe him in
Yeah, yeah.
And you've described him as abrasive, haven't you? And you said that he would never back down from a confrontation.
Yes.
And you said that he always had to have the last word, didn't you?
Yes.
And you even said that he would never let even a perceived slight go easily.
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you are excusing me, step down. At this time, the evidence is now, I'm sorry, do you have any more witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
At this time, the evidence is now closed and we'll begin with closing argument.
Your Honor, I would like to use some of my time now and reserve some for after the defense gives their closing.
Okay, and the timekeeper will be in charge of letting you know how much time you have for your rebuttal closing. You may proceed.
Your Honor, members of the jury, as the plaintiff attorney in this case, it is my job to convince you by preponderance of the evidence, which is more likely than not, the mall at Curly Corners was negligent in the hiring and retention of former Lieutenant Tony Jessup. That the mall, including head of mall Jamie Brooke, knew or could have known that there was a problem when Mr. Jessup worked for them and numerous complaints were made by customers. Like my co-counselor Sachi said at the beginning of this trial, this is a case about red flags. Teddy Exley noticed red flags when Mr. Jessup worked with her on the police force. Jean Stewart noticed red flags when the mall security became more like the military. And the other customers who made complaints noticed red flags when an innocent teenager was tackled and a child was screamed at by Mr. Jessup. As the defense gives you their closing, notice how they gloss over and ignore the red flags in this case, just like the mall at Curly Corners did when hiring Tony Jessup. Thank you.
Would the defense like to make a closing statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may begin.
For all the foregoing reasons that I will restate, my co-counsel and I will ask respectfully that the court affirm that there was no breach and that Jean Stewart caused her own accident. Despite the fact that the Curly Corners had trouble with their past security, they were not negligent in hiring Lieutenant Jessup. Due to the fact that the mall management took all necessary and proper protocol before hiring Lieutenant Jessup. Although Jamie Brooke only spoke to 2 references, both references gave approval. And of one of those references, Lieutenant Exley didn't provide the full exit interview. Now, regardless of the fact that Lieutenant Jessup had many complaints filed against him and the knowledge and the mall management knew about it, Lieutenant Jessup, I must remind you, did bring down the crime rates and disturbances in the mall. And of those complaints that were filed against him, 3 of them were filed by Gene Stewart, who knew about his prior hostility and wanted him gone. So she took the opportunity to use the mall's knowledge of not knowing about the hostility, which goes back into Assistant Lieutenant Exley not providing the full exit interview because there were 3 pages and he only sent 1. So Gene Stewart did this to get rid of Lieutenant Jessup. Now, we're not justifying Lieutenant Jessup's actions, but the Carly Corners Mall shouldn't be held accountable for Lieutenant Jessup's actions because the manager of the mall, Jamie Brooke, repeatedly told Lieutenant Jessup not to bring, that phasers were not allowed at the Curly Corners Mall. The plaintiff counsel said that Jamie Brooke knew that Lieutenant Jessup was carrying around a phaser, but they did not provide any substantial proof as to that knowledge. So, I ask you guys today, consider everything that I said. Think about it when you're listening to their rebuttal. Thank you.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Ron. The defense has said that Miss Brooke did all the necessary and proper protocol when hiring Tony Jessup, but she testified that she only called 2 references instead of the normal 3. They have also tried to blame this on Jean Stewart. They've tried to blame a senior citizen for being phased in the back, even though he told you all he did was poke Mr. Jessup on the shoulder and try to leave the mall. The defense has also said that Miss Exley did not send the exit interview, even though when Miss Brooke was on the stand, she testified she received it. Let's take a look at the red flags one more time. The red flags that the mall ignored because they did not care about the safety of their customers. Before hiring Tony Jessup, when she was talking to one of her 2 references, Jamie Brooke was told by Teddy Exley about the marching band incident at Melton County High School, the incident involving excessive force on high school students, the incident involving Tony Jessup that was documented in the papers, the incident that she made no effort to learn more about. Teddy Exley also testified to Mr. Jessup's use of excessive force and violence that she documented in the exit interview that she sent to Miss Brooke. And she also mentioned in an earlier fax. By ignoring these key issues, the mall did not exercise proper care before hiring Mr. Jessup. But this case is not only about what the mall could have or should have known before hiring Mr. Jessup, it is also about the retention of Mr. Jessup. So let's take a look at all the red flags that came after he was hired. Red flag number 1. Mr. Jessup requested a list of excessive weapons. Ms. Brooke testified that she did not allow some of these weapons. But the point is not whether or not the weapons were allowed, but that nightsticks, phasers, and rubber bullet guns were requested in the first place by a mall security guard. Red flag number 2. Mr. Jessup brought his phaser into work. He brought his phaser into work multiple times. He testified that he was told to put it away by Ms. Brooke, but he was never punished. Red flag number 3. Complaints from Mr. Jean Stewart as well as other customers. When an innocent teenager was tackled, even though they were not in a fight, and a child was yelled at, and Mr. Stewart was given an illegal parking ticket. Red flag number 4. Mr. Jessup issued criminal trespass warnings to people who did not cooperate with him, as well as making a mall's 10 most wanted list. Max truly testified to Mr. Jessup's abrasive nature, and Mr. Jessup himself told you that all of his actions were justified. All of these red flags came before the issue we've been discussing today, when on April 17th, Mr. Jessup approached Mr. Stewart screaming about his parking and backed him into a chair. When Mr. Stewart tried to leave the confrontation, he was phased in the back by Mr. Jessup. The final red flag. The red flag that could have been avoided had the mall picked up on all those that came before it. We ask that you find the defendant liable of negligent hiring and retention. Thank you.
All right, the trial has concluded, so you can take a deep breath on both sides. You're done. Would come to order. Thank you. So again, I want to congratulate you all on a very wonderful job, well done. We're going to take a few minutes to give some general feedback that we think will be beneficial going forward, and also just because this is a learning experience, we want you to actually learn. So as practitioners, we'd like to give you a little feedback. So Tom, would you like to start?
All right, well, I know how hard it is, so congratulate all of you. I think you learn more from constructive criticism. You know, I tried a ton of cases, and I make mistakes in every one. I don't want to hear people tell me good job. I want them to point out what I did wrong so I can get better. Start out with opening statements and closing too. They're not a speech. It's a time for you to get to know the jury. So when you stand up, they're really stiff, and Ashley said this the last one, you know, you have the fig leaf, your hands in front of your waist. That's your first opportunity to talk to the jury. So you have to create that relationship. Another big thing, my favorite thing about trying a case is cross-examination. It's not easy, but it's fun. And we saw a couple of different examples. Karima and Cathy. Y'all did a great job. It should be all about controlling the witness. And it was interesting because you did all yes or no questions and the witness just said yes, no, yes, no. You did the same thing, but the witness was much more evasive. But you didn't accept that. You made him answer the question, which means you're listening and you know that he's not answering. But answer my question. This is what I'm asking, and that's a good thing. And then what he said is, that's what I said. Well, no, that's not what he said. So you force him to answer, and that's a good trait. The other thing is with you two, Sachi and Alex. You know, in a movie, an adventure movie, when you get to the cliffhanger, the music goes da 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 da. So Sachi, you got to some really good points about the weapons, and you started walking over there. And I'm like, what? I couldn't hear you. And then Alex did just the opposite. Alex walked right up here and raised his voice and started making his points, because it doesn't matter what the witness is saying. Cross-examination is really the lawyer's turn to testify. So I'm listening to Alex, and Alex is basically using that as a closing argument. I could care less about it. But whereas Sachi, you walked away, I'm not sure why you did that, but I would say be a little bit more aggressive, especially when you're making those key points. And then I guess the other thing is the prior statements. And I saw the other team struggle with that a little bit too, but you don't have to have the witness read the statement. If you have a prior statement, all you ask is, did you make this statement? Just ask them if they said, did you say that he parked in the wrong space, or whatever the issue is. You don't have to show them the statement. You don't have to have them read from it. You ask them the question, and then if he gives different testimony, or she gives different testimony, then you use the statement to impeach him. But y'all all seem to struggle a little bit with that, but those are my comments.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that I liked the pace that everyone went at, especially in opening and closing. It was slow enough that we had time to absorb what you guys were saying and really think about it. I've seen instances, maybe it's nerves, but people speak a little too fast and you can't really get what they're bringing across. I liked the red flag theme and that you kept it pretty consistent throughout and kept bringing it back. I agree. I think body language is really important. You know, like you said, you want to raise your voice or have a certain inflection in your voice if, you're making a serious point or you want it to come across to the jury. Alec, I think you did a good job with that. So maybe some variation here and there. I'm sorry, and the Karima? Yeah, Karima. I thought in your closing you had great body language, very natural, like a conversation. You had really nice facial expressions. It just, you were using your hands and it looked very natural and you were comfortable moving around a little bit up there. So it's hard because, everyone has their little thing, like crossing your legs or putting your hands here. I know it's hard to get comfortable out there, not that I've done it that much and move around, but in my mock trial practicing, I know that it is a little difficult. So just work on, getting the comfort and using, the courtroom to move around. And the only last thing I would say is try not, even though I know it's frustrating, you might not even realize that you're doing it, but whatever the judge rules, don't let anybody else see any type of negative or extremely positive reaction. You want to make it seem like and this is what they did and it's not going to throw off my game or anything like that, and just always, make sure you say thank you, Your Honor, and address Your Honor and all that. And yeah, I think that both groups did a good job, and I know it's pretty scary, so I commend you all.
And Alec, I see you're laughing because you know that comment was for you, sir. You got to control those facial expressions. When they're saying something that you don't like and you have an objection, it's fine to make an objection, but you got to control the face because you're in a game mode, and you don't want the jury to see you. If anything, you let the jury make those crazy faces like, what? They shouldn't be saying this, but you're the lawyer and you're advocating for a client, so you want to keep it pulled in, even if you're like, oh my gosh, what are they doing? They can't be saying that. So and keep those faces under control. Also with plaintiff's team E, body language. So they touched on it a little bit. And I know our natural tendency is to put our hands in that fig leaf and to go here, or Alec, in your case, to grab your arm here. You all want to remain open. You don't want to close your arms off. Ladies, you both went here, and Alec, you went here. So keep your body language open. And one of the ways that you can do that is speak deliberately with your hands. For example, you can use your hand to talk like this, or you can use both of them, or you can put them down by your side, but you want to be very deliberate with your hand movements, okay? Also with your feet. Ladies, we can see when you're standing up there crossing your legs and if you're in front of the jury. And think about it, juries are like toddlers, even though they're going to be adults in the jury box, they're like toddlers when they have to sit there. They're easily distracted. So if you're crossing your legs, it's like, ooh, look at her shoes. Oh, those are cute. Oh, what kind of stockings are those she has on? So anytime you start doing something with your extra body parts, we're going to take notice and we're going to start looking at it. If you're rocking back and forth, we're going to be rocking back and forth with you, and we might start rocking and wondering and thinking something different. So you want to be mindful of your body. If you're going to move with purpose. So an example I like to give is you say something, then you walk, then you say something else. And you walk. So you don't want to be walking and talking because then the jury's like, oh, that's cool. And you don't want to make us dizzy. Okay, so that's one thing I want you all to work on in terms of your posture. Don't get flustered, both sides, when objections are made. Don't get flustered. Objections are fun. You have to think about them as fun. It's the one time you get to argue directly to a judge and get some feedback right then and there. Because what you're doing for the jury, they're not going to make a decision to the end. But when you're arguing an objection, you get to show, hey, look, jury, look at what I know. Listen to how I respond to this objection. They have no clue what you're talking about, but you get to sound good. Even if you don't know what it is, try to come up with something. Sometimes it helps to just take a minute, just breathe. You don't have to respond right then. Of course, I don't want you to take like 10 minutes and think about it. But take a deep breath and say, all right, what is it they're saying I can't do, and why can't I do this? Why I can do it. Okay, so that's how you respond to objections, both sides. I don't want, if an objection doesn't go your way, don't get flustered. I know that's easier said than done, and it's still hard even for people like me if an objection doesn't go my way in court. Great job circling back to exhibits. I just have to absolutely commend you on that, Sachi. You came back and got those exhibits in. You were just not going to let them get by without getting in. The proper foundation was not laid, and you're like, okay, now's the time, I'm going to get them in. To this side, you did a good job when the exhibit did not come in, specifically Karima, I believe it was, the statement, or no, it might have been, remind me your name. Taylor. How she had personal knowledge that John Stewart of what happened, and the statement never came in. Well, it came in eventually. You finally got back to the question because you felt like that was important. Don't give up on it. Don't let points derail you so much, but if you feel like you need to get something in and it's important, don't give up. And both of those were instances where neither of you gave up. Use exhibits. There were lots of exhibits that you all could have used to your advantage, even the ones that were already admitted. It doesn't matter that they were already admitted by the other side. you can use them, even if it had just been their chart, but you want to try to use something. Again, you're advocating for a client. You want to show your client, you want to show the jury you know what you're doing. And then the last point I'll make is to this team, don't extraneously admit exhibits. It's great that you all know how to handle exhibits and you know how to get them in, but if you're not going to ask that witness to explain what that exhibit is, because then you leave the jury wondering, we're like, hey, what was that? We didn't get to see it. They didn't talk about that one. And there were quite a few that you all admitted but never discussed. So we don't know what's in them and the jury's left like, what's in them? Or you'd admit them with one witness and you never discussed it until you got to another witness. So we're like, oh, that's what that is. That's how that plays in. So be mindful of, just because that witness can admit an exhibit, maybe doesn't necessarily mean they should, okay? So think about which witness is going to testify to the information that's in that exhibit, how it's useful, and what they can say about it if it actually relates to their testimony. Overall, I think you all did a very, very fantastic job. I know it's not easy. Again, just want to encourage you going forward. Don't get flustered. It's nothing that you all can't handle. You showed very nice poise and great grace today in trying this case, okay? Oh, one more.
One last thing, sorry. Plaintiff's witness, Lieutenant Jessup?
Yes.
Great job. We thought you were really great. We loved some of your little, preferably black comments about the weapons and stuff. We thought you did a really, really great job playing that role.
All right, and so with that, we are done. I think you all can report back downstairs to 7.